So in this video, I'm going to be trying to fix some drums that weren't recorded the best. Let's see what I can do. So I was asked to mix an album for my friend's band. Now, this is their second album, but it is the first time they've recorded everything themselves. I think they did a very good job, but there is one issue with the drums, and that's due to the interface they use. I forget the kind. It was a Behringer something. It was a 4-channel interface. They recorded 4 mics on the drums, which is great. They did kick drum, snare, and 2 overheads, which is ideal for having 4 inputs. The problem is 2 of those microphones got summed into mono. So there's 4 tracks, but 2 of them are the same. Now, the kick drum and an overhead are baked into one, and then the snare and an overhead are baked into one another mono track. That obviously limits a lot of things because stereo is out of the question, so you're not going to be able to pan the left and right overheads because you have the snare and the kick baked in there, which you want the snare and the kick to be center. Another issue is that now you can't process the snare and the kick drum individually from the overhead. So if I wanted to boost certain frequencies for like the beater of the kick drum, that's also going to boost a lot of cymbal sounds. Same with the snare. If I wanted to brighten up the snare drum, I'm going to be bringing a bunch of cymbals with it. So I'm going to try this one method. There's 2 methods I've been using on this album. I'm going to show you one that I think works best for me, and let's see what we can do. Alright, so you can see we got our 4 drum tracks here, and 2 of these are the same. So let's find out which ones are the same here. Now all 4 of these look very similar, but we could see here that it looks like these 2 are the same. And then these 2 are the same. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the levels. And then I'll solo the drums here. So let's have a listen. Alright, so I believe these 2 are exactly the same. Yeah, you can even see in the waveform here. Now, they also did some panning. I'm going to put this to mono here. Now, let's try and figure out which one has the kick and which one has the snare. That sounded more like the kick. And that sounds more like the snare. Let's double check. Yeah, that's definitely the snare. I'm going to use 3 tracks. So I'm going to make this my kick. I'm not even going to use this. I'm just going to mute that. I'm going to use this as a snare, and then I'm going to use this as my overhead. So 3 tracks here: kick, snare, and overhead. Kick, I'm probably just going to go ahead and cut all of the high end and just use this to try and bring out the thump. The snare and overhead, I'm probably just going to do the opposite. I'm just going to cut the low. So my approach here is, in this track, I'm going to bring the kick out as much as I can. This, I'm going to try and bring the snare out as much as I can. And this is just going to be for focusing on the cymbals, and I'll mix that in depending on how much cymbal bleed I get with my other tracks. So first things first, I'm going to just focus on the kick here. So I'm going to go 60 hertz, and I'm going to, not 560, 60, and I'm going to really boost. I'm going to do a narrow Q and really boost. This is something I normally would not do, but I really want to bring out the the low thump as much as possible. I might actually just go like this and really make it narrow. Alright, so that's really only the low punch. If you are not listening on headphones or speakers, you probably can't hear anything right now because your phone isn't going to be able to reproduce these low frequencies. Alright, before I move on to the snare, I'm going to go ahead and add some compression here. Now I'm just going to do this really quick for demonstration purposes. Let's go aggressive here. Maybe even more aggressive. Alright, that's the low thump. I mean, that's pretty much all I'm going to do for now. I might come back and mix it in better. Let's go ahead and move on to the snare. So we got our EQ here. Try and bring some of that lower thud of the snare. Give it a little more body. Do a high cut as well to get rid of some of that bright cymbal sound. Let me cut a little bit. Alright, let's add some compression to this. Now this is important. I really want that snare to get through, so I'm going to increase that attack. Because if I just have the attack super fast, it's just going to be cutting the snare out, which is extra important when you have cymbals already in the track. Alright, let's move on to the overheads. I'm going to do a more aggressive cut. Alright, I'm going to add in a little de-esser. This is something I really like to use on cymbals to kind of get rid of some of that harsh crash sound. And since it's in mono, I'm going to add a stereo widener on this. I'm hoping this won't affect the snare drum and give it any weird phase issues, but let's try this out. Go real extreme with it. Alright, well that's not doing anything. Let me try something else. Do a graphic phase shifter. And go mono to stereo. Alright, well, that's something. By the way, I'm only using plugins that come with Adobe Audition, just if you were wondering. Now I'm going to duplicate this track, and I'm just going to compress this one a little more. Really crazy with it. I might actually, since I'm doing a compressed one, 5 should be fine. Let's hear that with everything. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and make a stereo bus track. Guess it doesn't matter if it's stereo, but still. Alright. And I'm going to send all my drums there. And I'm just going to do some slight multiband compression on this. I'm going to use the drums preset. These settings are a little too aggressive for my taste, so I'm going to lower that a bit. also going to lower the attack a little bit. Alright, so now I'm going to make another stereo bus track, and this is going to be my reverb that I use for this song. Alright, so I'm not going to send my kick there because I don't want the low end having a bunch of reverb, but I am going to send my snare tracks and my overhead there. Now this is, I like to just start at -6. I think that's a good place to start. And I'm also going to just start with the snare track because I like to kind of like decide my reverb settings on the snare because that's what I really like to have the most reverb on, so I might as well make it sound great for that track. Alright. I'm pretty happy with those settings actually. Yeah, that sounds nice. Alright, let's bring in my other snare. And now with my overhead, I'm going to go -10. Now bring in the kick. I'm going to raise this up a bit. See how that's affecting my, okay, I'm going to raise my threshold a little bit on this. Getting a little muddiness around 150, so I'm going to kind of clean that up a bit. I'm going to do another low cut just to help clean that up. Maybe just another cut around 1K. And then I'm also going to bring down 35K just to let the vocals have a little more room there because those cymbals are still pretty harsh. Alright, let's listen to this. I'm going to bring down the compression on the one snare track just because it does sound a little over compressed to me. And when I have the second track here, which I'm using as like a snare compression track. So this is compressed really heavily and this isn't, so I don't want to go too overboard with that. Alright, so I think that's a pretty good place to start. I'm going to go ahead and add in the rest of the tracks. Of course, as I add in the rest of the tracks, I'm going to want to go back to the drums and EQ things differently to make it sit well with everything. So I'll leave you with the final mix that I did for them. And if you want to hear the final version, I will leave a link in the description for whenever they release their album because they worked really hard. The band's called The Grow Ops. I highly recommend them. I'll see you in the next
Too slow.